That's right.
My name is Abina Johnson, and this is Focus on Liberia. Hit it! From Cape Mount to Cape Palmas, mountain back to Atlantic Ocean, Obomi Hills to Pokonjre, to educate, elevate, and promote. Focus on Liberia. For Liberia, Liberia. For Liberia, yeah. From Monday to Sunday. From Monday to Sunday. It's focus on Liberia. Talk about home affairs. Hey, in diaspora, current affairs, reliable information, history, talking about culture, politics, education, entertainment. Business, sports, advertisement, articulation. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. Focus on Liberia. From Monday to Sunday. Focus on.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Focus on Liberia. This is Roundtable Africa, where we talk about the continent of Africa. My name is Dennis Jad, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In this edition of Roundtable Africa, we're going to be focusing on Mauritius. Our topic, democracy in Africa, and Mauritius is the focus tonight. I'm joined by our presenter, Mr. Mohamed Sherif, who is also a political analyst here on Focus on Liberia, and our presenter on Roundtable Africa. He's also a product of Waplo Institute all the way from River G in Kilipo. Welcome, sir.
Yes, Dennis, thank you very much.
We want to welcome all our viewers from across the globe. If you have not already done so, please share the show. Let's talk about Mauritius. And our topic, democracy in Africa. We are focusing on the country of Mauritius. And Mr. Sherif, let me, first of all, this is Ramadan. And how are you doing?
I am fabulous. I'm doing very, very well. We're in the final stretch now. So this is the final week of the holy month of Ramadan.
Oh, all right. Okay. And thank you also for taking up the time during this holy week, this holy month, to still find time to do this.
Of course.
We appreciate you.
Not a problem.
Today is Mauritius, and bring us up to speed, where we've come from and how we got here while we're talking about Mauritius.
Thank you, Dennis. So we're talking about Mauritius because it is very significant. This March 12 was the 58th independence anniversary of Mauritius. Mauritius gained independence from Britain and in March of 1968. And ever since Mauritius's independence, this country has been very peaceful. It's one of the most stable countries in Africa, one of the best democracies. We've talked about democracies, Dennis, democracies in Africa. We've talked about Tanzania. We talked about Ivory Coast. We've talked about Cameroon. We've talked about Cape Verde, Uganda. And now we're talking about Mauritius. Mauritius is one of the top, tier in terms of its democratic credentials. and we're talking about real democracy. We're not just talking about elections. Election is a component of democracy, but how Mauritius has been able to do it is fascinating. This is a country with basically an agrarian economy during pre-independence Mauritius, under the British. It was a monocrop economy where sugar was the main industry. So Mauritius was dependent on sugar, on these sugar plantations that left by the colonial masters, because that's how it started, and we'll get to that. We'll get to in the early Mauritius, from the Dutch to the English, perhaps from the Arabs, quite frankly, to the British. So from a monocrop economy, from a poor colony to this prosperous democracy, this very stable democracy that is Mauritius. Mauritius is really a success story in Africa. Mauritius is located in the Indian Ocean. It's on the east coast of Africa. It has 790 square miles. Think about this, Dennis. Liberia has 43,000 square miles. So Liberia can dwarf this country. Liberia takes up a lot of space as compared to Mauritius. It's only 790 square miles. And in terms of population, Mauritius is 1.3 million people. So this is the map of Mauritius. It's in the Indian Ocean. It's an archipelago. What is an archipelago? In our discussion of Cape Verde, we talk about archipelago, a chain of islands surrounded in the body of water, usually in a large body of water, usually a sea or ocean. In this case, Mauritius, the archipelago is located in the Indian Ocean. So you call it archipelago because there's also the island of Rodriguez, and there's another island. There's a series of other islands that make up the nation of Mauritius. The main island is Mauritius. The capital, Port Louis, is the biggest city in Mauritius. And so it is significant. Mauritius has had 13 democratic elections and 7 peaceful transfers. They are a very peaceful country. So I call it miraculous Mauritius because British economist James Mead painted a dark picture of Mauritius, in pre-independence Mauritius back in 1961. This is a Nobel laureate, James Mead. Professor Mead prognosticated that, this agrarian economy, somehow the Mauritius, in other words, that Mauritius will become a failed state, and that this monocrop economy also has a lot of population, that the people of Mauritius, that the birth rate was too high, and people were, certain diseases were eliminated. People are living a lot longer. And he speculated that if this trend continues, that Mauritius is not going to succeed. In other words, Professor James Mead predicted that Mauritius was going to be a failed state. So Mauritius has defied those predictions to become what it is today.
Right. Thank you. We want to welcome all viewers. River says Pro already saying nothing much is heard of Mauritius. So thank you for coming. You're going to hear much today. That's why, yeah. And for a country like that, how they do it, what they are doing right, what they are doing wrong, we're going to learn all that today. Let's look at the map.
Yeah, let's look at the map. So you can see, this is a zoom. When you zoom it out, it looks like this. This is not large. When you look at the map of Africa, Dennis, this is what I want to look at. In the grand scheme of things, among the compendium of African states, where is Mauritius? You have to go all the way to the East Coast, around perhaps Madagascar. So if you look around Tanzania, if you're going all the way towards Tanzania in the east, and you look downwards, it's like a little dot in there somewhere.
Yeah.
That's the country of Mauritius. That's the island nation of Mauritius. 1.3 million people, 790 square miles. That is it. That's it. Right now, Mauritius is in negotiation with Britain to return the Chapagos, the Chapagos, I believe it is the name of the island that Britain still controls. The Chapagos Island back to Mauritius. Maybe that will increase, not maybe, that will definitely increase the land mass a little. What is important about that area? That area is the base of the United States. The United States has a large naval base, the military base in that area. And so it is from that area that the United States military is able to launch, airborne attacks, when they go to war, like, the war with Iraq back in the 90s and the early 2000s. And several operations have been launched from that area. So that area is currently under British and American control. And so the Mauritian government is in negotiation to return the Chapagos Island back to Mauritius. And so that is an ongoing discussion that has been held at this time.
Mm. And you call it miraculous Mauritius.
Yeah.
That's the reason you named earlier.
Miraculous Mauritius, because politically it's stable. There has been no military coup d'etat in Mauritius. Mauritius does not have a standing army. There was a riot in pre-independence Mauritius in January 1968. Independence was obtained in March 1968. So around January 1968, there was a big riot between different communities in Mauritius, the Muslims and, some group of Christians, mostly Africans, they were involved in clashes, in the capital, Port Louis. A lot of people, dozens died during those clashes, if not hundreds. And so the British Army was called in to quell that violence. And ever since then, Mauritius has been largely peaceful around the political experiment of 1968. And this political experiment was started as a parliamentary democracy. And you have an executive prime minister and a president, a ceremonial president. The prime minister is elected by the people, and the ceremonial president is appointed or elected by parliament. And the president is basically ceremonial. We talked about Cape Verde, so you can look at the difference between Cape Verde, another stable democracy, and Mauritius. Cape Verde has this semi-presidential system of government, where the prime minister is the head of government and the president is the head of state. So they have, this sort of responsibility, dual responsibility where, they both have, some level of executive authority. In Mauritius, it's different. The prime minister is executive or has executive authority. He runs the government. And what is also interesting about Mauritius is that this is a country that has been ruled by two families for the most part, the Ramgoolam family and the Juknov. The first prime minister was Sirosago Ramgoolam. Ramgoolam, after him, after his tenure, there was another politician, Juknov, Anaru Juknov. So those two guys, their descendants are the ones now running the country. The current prime minister, Nevin Ramgoolam, is the son of the first prime minister of Mauritius. So power has rotated between these two families for a long time, since independence. And what is also interesting in Mauritius is that the Indo-Mauritians are a large segment of the Mauritian population. They control the level of power in Mauritius. You have, in terms of, something I wanted to come to before I get into all of the political part of it, is that, in terms of the ethnic composition of Mauritius, 67% are Indo-Mauritians. The Creoles or Afro-Mauritians, Africans who were transported from Zanzibar, from Mozambique, from Madagascar to the slave plantations, the French and the British slave plantations in Mauritius during the era of slavery are the Afro-Mauritians and or Creoles. You know, their language is called Creole, their ethnicity is called Creole. They constitute about 28% of the population. You have the Sino-Mauritians, so you have Chinese in Mauritius who are also citizens of Mauritius. They constitute 3% of the population. You have the Franco-Mauritian, the French, they constitute about 1.6% of the population, Dennis. So what you have going on is that in terms of politics, you know, this is dominated by the Indo-Mauritians. The Indo-Mauritians are Hindus or you know, Muslims from the Indian subcontinent. And I'll tell you how these groups were brought together on the island of Mauritius. So Mauritius started early in the 10th century, 11th century sometimes. The Arabs, you know, discovered this area. They left somehow, you know, sometime later, and the Portuguese came in. And the Portuguese didn't really stay long. You know, the Portuguese ships that came to Mauritius didn't really stay long. And after that, it was the Dutch. So most Mauritian history will start with the Dutch colony. So the Dutch colony was started in 1638, and the Dutch, you know, after some time, it wasn't profitable. These guys were in the business of making money, so it wasn't profitable to stay in Mauritius. So they left and went down to the Cape of Good Hope. The Cape of Good Hope, and it's in South Africa. You know, that was a profitable spot. So the Dutch left. But it was the Dutch that named the island Mauritius. Mauritius is named after Prince Maurice of the Netherlands. He was the son of the king. He died young. Prince Maurice, after whom Mauritius is named, died really young. So the island of Mauritius, this country now of Mauritius, was named after a Dutch prince. So hence the name Mauritius. When the French took over, after the Dutch left, they renamed it the island of France, L'Île de France. And they kept Mauritius. So what the French did was they established a thriving slave economy. You know, they engaged in a lot of slavery. They brought slaves, captured Africans from Zanzibar, captured Africans from Madagascar, Mozambique, and places like that. You know, Black people to work on the slave plantations, you know, under degrading conditions, under devastating conditions. You know, the French considered Africans at the time as merchandise. And so these people, you know, there was no honor, there was nothing. All our people did was work for the French people, the Europeans, in their sugarcane plantation, Dennis. And some of these people were resold to other slave traders. So the French had this economy, had this going on for a very, very long time. So the French occupied Mauritius from 1715 to 1810. And then the British, of course, knowing what was going on, so they attacked the French and defeated the French in around the early 1700s. And, you know, they became the new, actually it was around the 1800s, the early 1800s. My apologies. It was around the 1800s that the British dislodged the French, and they continued the slave economy on the island. So from 1810 to 1968, the British occupied Mauritius. They also carried on slavery. When slavery ended around 1834 in the British Empire, the British then engaged in a system that changed the demographic of Mauritius permanently. So the British that were in control of India brought tens of thousands of Indians as indentured servants to work on the plantation. So now they not only diluted the population, the Indians that they brought to the island of Mauritius, their population far exceeded the African population on the island of Mauritius. And this is why up to this day now, you have a significant, very large number of Indo-Mauritians who outnumber the Africans. Hence, in this democracy, you have the Indo-Mauritians who have continuously ruled Mauritius through a democratic method, through the democratic channel. They are the leaders they win election. They, you know, for the most part, the prime minister, as I told you, has been, you know, in the hands of Indo-Mauritians, you know, not to ethnicize anything here, but that is a reality. The level of power is in the hands, you know, of the Indo-Mauritians. And although, again, this is a real democracy.
Yeah. And Mr. Sherif, as you talk about the different, you know, from the Arabs slightly to the Dutch and the Portuguese, and then the Dutch, then the French, then the British, and then brought in the, you know, I'm thinking this is 17th, 16th century, all around there, right? There are people there in Mauritius, what is today known as Mauritius.
Yes.
But constantly people are coming, occupying, taking over. You know, I don't want us to go into the politics and the history of that, but why is that? That, you know, these people always taking over. Is it that the Africans are so welcoming, or is it that they can fight, or is it they've been deceived?
Africans are very receptive. Where in the world do you go, Dennis, and someone, a poor person, a poor farmer, is sharing his or her food with you, is sharing their bed, you know, their room that they occupy? A chief, you go to a village now, the chief himself will relinquish his bedroom and say, look, you know, my son, you know, hey, you're the stranger. What do we say? Stranger is bigger than you. That's why, you know, my uncle taught us this. He said, you know, you see a stranger, you know, give up your food. And we were little, you know, back in Kalibo, we will be sitting there, and uncle was give them the food, and we were like, but we want to eat too. But the bottom line is, African people love strangers. We love strangers. You know, we welcome everybody. Like strangers, you know, for us it's a big deal. So the same thing with the Europeans. So when the Europeans came, you know, I don't want to get into, again, the religiosity and all these different things that happen. But, you know, and even when the Europeans came, we welcomed them. We welcome them as part of the human race. That's what Africans are. So when we welcome them, when the Africans welcome them, you know, with open arms, they were hiding something behind their backs. You know, they were hiding knives. They were hiding some things behind their backs, and they had things diabolical intentions for our people, and so people were captured. You know, with their hands down. We weren't prepared for war. You know, historically, Africans weren't prepared for war. They weren't prepared for anything, you know, of that nature, because our nature is that we are a great people. We are a decent people. We are not beasts and stuff like that. We don't harm nobody. And so when these people came, you know, they were welcomed. And so they overtook our people basically with their hands down. And here's another thing that happened, Dennis. What else happened? They were able to effectively create divisions among the different, you know, composition, the different ethnic compositions. Oh, you're a Mandingo and you're better than this group. Or you're a Tutsi and you're better than this group. You are a Choli and you're better than this other group. You know, you're a Kakwa. You know, I talked about, you know, Uganda the other day. So I'm remembering these other ethnic groups from Uganda as well, you know. So the division was immense, where, you know, they're going in, you know, elevating one ethnic group at the expense of another. And so when you're elevated in this manner by this stranger, you know, that you think knows everything, and then you are now thinking that you're better than your brothers and sisters, and you are allied with them. So they were able to peel off, you know, the unity, you know, the glue that held you know, the African people together. So when they did that, they were then able to effectively infiltrate, you know, into our, you know, homes and different things of that nature and capture our people. Because it's an excellent question. How is it that a small group of Europeans were able to march from Europe? They didn't have a whole lot. They weren't many, but they were able to capture a whole continent. How did they do that? They did that through various means. It wasn't just the machinery of war. Of course, that was also important, because if you didn't sign that treaty, these treaties that were obtained under duress, if you didn't sign those treaties, they kill you. They kill you, and they kill your people. And they humiliate your people. So nobody wanted to go through that. But besides that, they also have other weapons, other tools in their toolbox. They had a lot of tools in their toolbox, and one of those tools was division. They spread division among our people, and hence they were able to easily capture Africans, easily capture the continent. And it still goes on today. What do we have? We've talked about Mobutu Sese Seko a lot. What happened in the Congo? Mobutu was recruited to kill Lumumba. He did that. He worked for the agents of imperialism for about 4 decades. Mobutu did. And so when his utility was over, when they had no more use for him, he was jettisoned, and he died. He died in Morocco. That's a pitiful old man. Yeah. The West could not accept him to come into the country anymore. They didn't want him anymore. He called Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton said, "No, I don't want you here. You're sick. Okay, go find somewhere else. You're going to die. Okay, go die somewhere else." And King Hassan of Morocco, good man, welcomed him, took him in, gave him a villa to live there and die, spend the rest of his life. He didn't take long, he died. So up to this day, the colonial masters, the agents of imperialism, colonialism is over. So you have, neocolonialism. You have the agents of neocolonialism still employing, Africans, unprincipled Africans to fight their own African brothers and sisters. You have, the agents of neocolonialism still expanding their tentacles to different places. They're controlling our economy. They control, a lot of our infrastructure. They control our governments. You look at Liberia. Who's in control of Liberia, of the Liberian economy? They're not the indigenous Liberians. Who's in control of anything in Liberia? Not the indigenous, certainly not the indigenous Liberians. We go to Europe, we borrow money. We go to China, we borrow money. We go to Britain, we borrow money. We go everywhere, we borrow. And that's what we're doing. As long as we are in, the hands of these people, we're not going to develop as a country, as a continent. We're not going to develop. That's why it's important to talk about what we can do and what examples to look at. Maybe we can look at the examples as imperfect as Mauritius is. Maybe we can look at these kinds of examples. It's an imperfect democracy, but maybe we can look at that, to say, okay, maybe what can we learn from Mauritius? And this is the reason for this presentation, Dennis.
Thank you. And let's set the stage. Riverset Pro is asking, I think Riverset has a concept of a country. And so let's compare. He said, it seems to me that Mauritius isn't a real country. It seems like a conglomerate made of different outsiders and insiders. And if I could add Riverset Pro, like America. Mm-hmm. But let's talk to this issue of Mauritius not being a real country because it's a conglomerate. It says like a conglomerate.
I'm not sure, but I'll try to answer it this way. The island, the area I was talking about where the U.S., military base is called Diego Garcia. So when you will often hear when the U.S. launches an attack, and they say, hey, B-52 bombers have took off from Diego Garcia. When you hear Diego Garcia is historically part of Mauritius. The U.S. and Britain leased Diego Garcia. They renewed the lease recently for 99 years. That is, we won't be around when when that lease is up. I don't know if anybody watching now who will be around when the current lease for 99 years is up. I'd like to be here to see it, but God is not going to do that. But anyway, so what I'm going to say to this is that Mauritius is an archipelago is a group, is a chain of islands, out in, out there, right? So an island, so first of all, the concept of an island, right? We know what an island is. We have Providence Island right in Monrovia that we can store the Providence Island, even though we take that for granted, but that's a big deal to me. So you look at an island, it's a piece of land surrounded by water, right? Simply put, this is our elementary geography. They taught us that. Mr. Charles Chia, who was my elementary geography teacher, taught us this. And Miss Davis, our AG, that's Miss Davis. Miss Davis taught me, that the island, an island is a piece of land surrounded by water.
And I got a different definition. They say it was a bowl of fufu surrounded by soup.
There you go. There you go. That is your teacher. So when you put it that way, every child will get it, right? Not this definition I'm giving, but your definition. When you put that out there, every child will get that definition. So there you go. So surrounded by soup. But yeah, that's what an island is.
So I think what he's getting at, I think Roman says pro concept of a country is indigenous people. Right? Like you have these ethnic groups, you got Lof, Bandi, Pele. So for him, if you have more Indians or Indo-Mauritius, and you have this other group, to him, it doesn't look like a country. It should be,
right.
So I think that's what he's getting at.
I hear that. Yeah. So Mauritius, if you will, is a creation. It's a colonial creation, if you will, where it was, in the 11th century was, first discovered by Arabs who went there. The evidence is that it was not habitable, right? It was not inhabited, I should say. It was not inhabited around that time. Even when the Portuguese came, around the early 1500s, it was not inhabited at the time. So what happened was the Dutch started to bring, slaves on the island, and the French precipitated this, and a lot of Africans were brought on the island. So yes, it is true that the island was not inhabited. So it was the creation of it is a colonial project. Okay, so to put it succinctly, and so there were thousands and thousands of Africans who were brought to work on the sugarcane plantation. So sugarcane was the main crop. There was ebony, wood that was being exploited by the Europeans, but the sugar factory was a big deal in Mauritius. So that's what the Africans were brought in to work on. So River says Pro is onto something, and he's correct. I think he's correct. It was a creation, a colonial creation that brought in all these different ethnicities. They brought in the Indians, from the Indian subcontinent. So the Indo-Mauritians were brought in as indentured servants to work on the plantations after slavery ended. So that created a demographic situation that the Afro-Mauritians are contending with today, because they are outnumbered by 2-to-1 margin by the Indo-Mauritians. And that is not going to change anytime soon, because you have 67% of the population who are Indo-Mauritians as compared to about 28% or 30% who are Afro-Mauritians. In fact, there was a guy, Dr. James Harmon, I sent you the video, who campaigned for, the Creole language to be part of the curriculum. It wasn't until recently. It was through his advocacy that the Creole language was made optional for the school curriculum of Mauritius. So, the Creoles, the Afro-Mauritians, are really underrepresented in government and the economy. You have the small Franco-Mauritian population who really control the economy. They're living large, as we say in Liberia. They're living like millionaires. You see, the poor ones are living large. They're living around the coast. It has beautiful beaches and whatnot. That's where these guys live. They have everything. They have cars. They have massive houses. Dennis, I look, I was reading one of the newspapers from Mauritius, the Express newspaper in Mauritius, and they have some advertisement. And I saw this 6-room compound, beautiful, for $140,000. Can you imagine this? This doesn't get me that in the United States. So it is a beautiful, absolutely beautiful country. And all of these, the Franco-Mauritians enjoy these facilities. They dominate the financial and banking sector of the Mauritian economy. The Afro-Mauritians are going along. I mean, this is originally, you could say that, they are the pioneers, one of the pioneers of Mauritius. But now, because of what the British and the French and British did, because of what happened, especially the British, because of what they did, bringing the Indians from the Indian subcontinent has dramatically changed the demographic of Mauritius.
And Mr. Sherif, to that man's point, this is what I've started. I have written the concept paper already to make a colloquial part of the curriculum in Liberia. And this here is why.
There you go.
Right, here is why.
Yes.
Because we are teaching English instead of teaching skills. So if you're supposed to teach somebody how to take care of their environment, civic education, and all these things, how is it easy for anybody to get that and practice it if you taught that in colloquial compared to English? Right. Because if you taught that in colloquial, when I was in Bamakama teaching, we taught the song. If we were teaching songs, health education song, we taught that in Pele, because in the Pele, so when a boy goes home and singing it, the mother hears it and is able to do something.
Yes.
But if this is in a complicated language that the mother does not understand, it is only for the knowledge of the child.
Yes.
Nobody's going to implement that.
Yes.
And that's why,
And before I come back to the form of government and something, any other question you may have or the audience may have, is that Dr. Harmon was in his deliberation, he basically so he's an activist. He was an activist for the inclusion of the Creole language into the curriculum. So one of the things that he said was, when he went to school, his mom expected him to come back home with learn after he had learned his French. He's now Europeanized, and he comes on and he can speak all the good French and he get this good job. But to him, that wasn't it. Something is left out. Where is our language? Where is it?
Yeah.
It's dead. So in essence, he revitalized, rejuvenated the Creole language, if you will. It can be argued that Dr. Harmon had a tremendous effect on, the inclusion of Mauritian Creole into the school curriculum. That's just one step. What if there were several Dr. Harmon, his name is Dr. Jimmy Harmon. What if there were several Jimmy Harmons in Mauritius who are advocating for other things? One thing I learned from that experience, from Dr. Harmon's experience, is that the Mauritian government, the Mauritian society is tolerant, willing to listen to different views to incorporate. Because, in Liberia, we've been talking about some things forever, and nobody will listen to you now if you try to talk about something and they say, oh, those guys are just disgruntled. Yeah. Let's leave them alone. They know too much book.
They're crazy.
Yeah, they're crazy. Don't mind them. In Liberia, people would dismiss you. But over there in Mauritius, Dr. Harmon was not dismissed. His advocacy paid off, where now Creole is incorporated into the curriculum of the Mauritian education system. And so when you talk about this country, their form of government is parliamentary form of government. As I mentioned earlier, you have a prime minister. You have the executive prime minister. Ramgolam, the son of Ramgolam, the first prime minister, is now the current prime minister. He won election, his term election in 2024. And so under the parliamentary system, you have this executive prime minister. You have a ceremonial president. The prime minister is directly elected by the people. He's the head of government. He holds executive authority. And parliament in the National Assembly, it's called the National Assembly. The Mauritian National Assembly, Dennis, has 70 members. How many members do we have? We have a lot more than that, right? But the Mauritian government has 70 members. National Assembly has 70 members, 62 of whom are directly elected by the people, and 8 members are selected from what the system called the best losers, the best loser system. Under the best loser system of BLS, you have, this is where they go in to, a runner-up, someone in a minority group, the Creole group or whatever group, right? That they try to include the minorities into the legislature under the best loser system. It's more complicated than I explained. It requires a whole lot of explanation because they go by certain, the 1972 census and whatnot. So they have their own formula of coming up with the eight best losers that they can put into the legislature. But the bottom line is that they're innovative to think this way. This is forward thinking. This is the reason why, perhaps, I will argue, that you've not had a mutiny, an uprising, a military coup for a country that has no standing army. They have police. They depend on the British to defend them. Maybe that's going to change. I don't know. But for right now, they have not had any sort of military coup. They have not had anything along those lines. And they are very, very stable. So maybe, Dennis, we can learn from these people. Liberia can go send your, legislators over there. Liberia now, I think they call their legislators parliamentarians. We're always changing things. Like we call, LFA now, we call it just FA to mimic the British. Like, it's not FA, it's LFA. When I was growing up, it was LFA. But I don't want to deviate. But get people together and go out there, and study the Mauritian system. It's not perfect by any means because beneath this veneer of stability and prosperity in Mauritius, there are also the Afro-Mauritians that I continue to talk about who are underrepresented in the economy of Mauritius. They're very underrepresented. You have the small Franco-Mauritian population who's controlling the economy. They're living large. They're living like millionaires in Mauritius, these Franco-Mauritians. So they never left after the end of slavery. They love their place because it's an island. It's all out there, beautiful beaches and whatnot, beautiful infrastructure, beautiful healthcare system is tremendous. The social welfare system is tremendous. And so these people are living out there large. And meanwhile, the Afro-Mauritians are very underrepresented. And so that is the dilemma that Mauritius has, even with, this vibrant economy, the vibrant, the vibrant economy, the democracy, the stability, the model that they show. Despite all that, deep underneath this veneer, there are still issues. So what the government of Mauritius did some years ago, they set up a truth commission in 2009 to study not only study the history of Mauritius, but the social condition of Mauritians. And they put together a beautiful report. So for those who are interested in Mauritius, please read the Mauritian Constitution, read the Truth Commission report that was published in 2011. When we come up here on Focus on Liberia and present to you these countries, these democracies in Africa, we come in with facts and the evidence, come in with the knowledge that we've gained from the research that we've made ourselves. And so These things, these resources are there, and they're at the end of these these slides. So you're going to see them. This is beneficial for people watching now, and those will be interested later. That will want to use this as a lead to a bigger research. So the Mauritian Constitution is part of those resources. The Truth Commission report is part of those resources. It's tremendous. It's a great report, a great way to understand the population dynamics and all these different things, slavery and all the different things that occur in Mauritius, that have occurred in Mauritius from the beginning of time up to now. And so going back to the system of government, an executive prime minister who was elected for a 5-year term of office. There was the latest election was in 2024, and the sitting prime minister Jugnoth was defeated. So the votes were still being counted when Mr. Jugnoth conceded. I don't think the count had really commenced. Well, the count had commenced, and he saw that he was, not going to win, so he conceded. And this is a kind of peaceful transfer that has occurred in Mauritius year after year, year after year. So you don't have any qualms. Nobody is going into, some kind of, subterranean environment to bring up a military uprising, a coup d'etat, stuff like that. Nobody is doing that in Mauritius. And because nobody is doing that, you have prosperity. One of the reasons why you have prosperity is because of the stability that Mauritius has. So one of the things that any country must try to achieve is stability. You have to have the level of stability needed in order to have, investors come into the country, to have tourists come into the country. If I want to invest, for example, in Liberia now, I don't want to hear, if I'm an investor in Liberia, I don't want to hear any instability. I don't want to hear about any instability. I don't want to hear about any armed uprising or stuff like that, because those are detrimental to business investment. Hence, Mauritius has none of those. So therefore, you have foreign investors flocking into Mauritius, wealthy millionaires flocking into Mauritius. You have tourists flocking into Mauritius, who love the island of Mauritius, who love the beauty of Mauritius. And all of these, different people, different, the tourists and, foreign investors are pumping in money, tremendous amount of resources into the Mauritian economy. So if there's anything that Liberia can learn from Mauritius, the first thing is maintain your stability that you have now. And the rule of law is important. I hear President Bouaka talks about the rule of law, the administration of justice. I mean, he says these things, but then contradicts that with disobeying the Supreme Court decisions every single time. I heard Dr. Yan was on here the other day talking about his situation where the president has not been able to has not been able to upheld, the executive has not upheld the decision rendered by the Supreme Court. What kind of society are we living in Liberia? What kind of society are we living in? We have 5 million people, and our GDP is 2 billion. Mauritius has 1.3 million people, and their GDP is about $16 billion as of 2025. Can we learn a lesson from this? We complain that we're poor. Oh my God, we're poor people. Oh, Papa, bless us. Give us this. Give us that. Please help us. When we can help ourselves, we can help ourselves. We can promote certain things. There's certain things that we can't, we don't have to purchase. One is our commitment to the rule of law. There is no market that you can go to purchase the rule of law, right? These are abstract qualities. These are things that you can uphold yourself. The president of the Republic of Liberia, because the reason why I'm juxtaposing, as you see my presentation, I'm juxtaposing Liberia and Mauritius because I am a Liberian. Dennis is a Liberian. This platform is dedicated to educating the African population, the African people, but specifically like the Liberian state, about what goes on in other countries. So our goal, our desire is to inform, educate, and entertain. And this platform, this particular, democracy in Africa, this Roundtable Africa, is intended to educate the Liberian populace about what is going on in other countries so that we can take a cue, we can learn from these countries. So one of the countries definitely that we can learn from is Mauritius. We also talk about Cape Verde. Cape Verde is a country that we can learn from. We've given those prescriptions. That's a reason why we take time, somebody like myself, come here and give a master class in, the democratic experiment that is going on in Africa and all these different things that go on in Africa, so that hopefully, one of these days, someone will sit there and say, God, I saw this, this could be a lead. Who knows, right? We're going to do our job. We know that our leaders are not interested in these kinds of things because, they're very cynical. The Liberian leaders are very cynical. People in Liberia are very cynical, for the most part. And, they're going to call us the elite and, that the people, these people, but when you do that, you are degrading your country. You need to learn from other countries. You need to learn what other successful democracies are doing. You need to learn what other successful economies are doing. This thing is not hard. It's not hard at all. Just commit yourself. And the fact that, the Mauritian people, the government, the leadership in Mauritius has committed itself, to this level of economic advancement. They've gone from a monocrop economy. Sugarcane was the main economy in 1968. Today is tourism, is the business sector, is hotels, it's all these different things. It's IT now, Dennis, your area, your specialty. It's all of these things that Mauritius is promoting on the island, and hence the country is very wealthy, is stable at the same time, and is welcoming from from everything that I hear.
Thank you. And we touch a little bit. Let's go to the politics. You talk about the economy, the social structure.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, let's talk politics.
Yeah, so let's talk politics. So politically, it's a democracy. This democracy is it's been an enduring democracy. History tells us, that, when you have stability, when you have commitment to the rule of law, the administration of justice, your country, your society will be stable. This has been stable for a very long time now. For 58 years, Mauritius has been stable. There has been no military takeover. They're not even thinking about it. So they're investing, they're putting their eggs in the democratic basket, So Professor Rukaya Casanelli, someone whose article that I read, said, argued that one of the reasons why Mauritius is stable is because they've invested in the ballot. So ballot instead of the bullet. Ballot instead of bullet. It's the other way around when you talk about other countries. Other countries in West Africa, in perhaps in Central Africa, in East Africa, they have invested. What have they invested in? They have invested in the bullet over the ballot. I lost the election, but I'm not going to lose. I'm not going to go down like this. I'm going to go ahead and form a rebel group, an insurgency against the central authority, a la Yoweri Museveni. Museveni wanted to be president all along. And when he lost the election to Obote, he said, no way, in 1980. He said, no way. Obote didn't win. This was fraud. So they didn't settle it. Obote wasn't willing to settle. Museveni wasn't willing to settle. So he goes into the jungle and start his fight against Yoweri Museveni. People died just for him to claim power. In Mauritius, nobody has died. There's no political prisoner. right now as we speak, again, juxtaposing, Liberia has a political prisoner. Prophet Key is locked up, who is a political prisoner. There may be other political prisoners from the period of the alleged the burning of the Capitol building. We don't know where the outcome of that now. But there may be political prisoners because the news has moved on. There may be political prisoners from that period. In Mauritius, they don't have political prisoners. There's no political prisoners, no witch hunt and all these different things. It's not like the Supreme Court is handing down a decision and the president said, I'm going with the majority. There is an opinion. There's a reason why you have the Supreme Court. There's a reason why you have the judicial system. There's a reason why you have a constitution, the rule of law. There's a reason why this must be upheld, to the level at which when you swore, when you took that oath of office, you must uphold that sacred duty and responsibility to uphold the rule of law. In Liberia, it's the opposite. In Mauritius, they have upheld the rule of law. And that's one of the reasons why they're very stable. Politically, one of the things that I'm going to also say is that, there have been three political parties in Mauritius that have dominated Mauritian politics: the Labour Party, the Mauritian Socialist Movement, and the Mauritian Militant Movement, the MMM. The two families, I've already mentioned this, two families have dominated Mauritian politics. So you have three parties that have dominated Mauritian politics. You have two families that have dominated Mauritian politics. There's two families, the Jukno family and the Ramgolan family. These are Indo-Mauritians. They have dominated. There was only one time that you have this Franco-Mauritian called Paul Béranger, who won for a brief period. Paul Béranger served as prime minister. Other than that, the rest of the time has either been a Ramgolan or a Juknoth. Ramgolan, Juknoth. Ramgolan, Juknoth. So it has been that way. But, you cannot complain about that because, again, this is the stable is democracy. They're voting for them. So the Indian majority dominates the politics. The Indo-Mauritian dominate the politics of Mauritius. You have the Franco-Mauritians who dominate the economy, the top tier of the economy. So I talked about that a little earlier. And the key foundation,
Right. The slide before that, the economic textile,
right?
You talk about the IT. Now, the Liberia's economy is 1 billion. We're not 2 yet.
Right.
We just went 1 billion.
Yes.
1.2 billion.
Yes. So Liberia's overall GDP, though, when you talk about GDP per capita, it's 1 billion. But overall GDP, Liberia is 5.18 billion, compared to Mauritius, which is almost $16 billion, according to IMF report, according to Worldometer report from 2025. So tremendously wealthy as compared to Liberia. So why is that? Why don't we need to study why these guys are so wealthy?
And you stated that the strategy for success.
Yeah, the strategy for success. Yeah, stated that. Diversification. They've reduced dependence on sugar, right? They reduce our dependence on sugar, which the Professor Mead prognosticated. That Mauritius, in other words, that Mauritius will be a failed state because they have a monocrop economy. In times, in the lead up to independence, Mauritius had sugar production was the mainstay, the principal crop. Sugar was the principal crop because, the colonial masters, the British and the French had these large, the sugar plantations, which, slaves work on these sugar plantations, and, the indentured laborers work on these sugar plantations. So this was the principal economy during in the lead up to independence. And so Professor Mead stated that, this is not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't sustainable because, the price of sugar was hitting low on the world market. It was, it was a hard time. And so this Nobel laureate, you know, stated that besides that the birth rate was too high, that the population was too high for a small country. And so he suggested that Mauritius is going to fail. But Mauritius defied those predictions and turned things around. They diversified into textiles, and one of the things that Mauritius has been able to do is low taxes, no capital gains, tax, ease of doing business is tremendous with Mauritius. And you have now their future focus. They're looking at what they can do because of their location in the Indian Ocean. They're looking at renewable energy now. They're looking at diversifying more. So Mauritius, the sky for them now is the limit. And so we need to study that. We also can invest into that ocean economy. Liberia, that is your county, Sino County, Greenville, beautiful Greenville, sitting next to the Atlantic Ocean. We're not making use of this. All we're doing, we're mining sand. We're letting people, Chinese people go out there and mine sand, undermine our ecosystem. And that's supposed to be okay with us. How is that okay? How is it okay for them to mine sand, along our coastlines and devastate our ecosystem, of our oceans and stuff like that? They're not doing that back home. They're not doing that back home. But, for us, it's anything goes. Oh, just leave the people alone. How? Why? Why is it allowed? Liberia, again, is one of the most beautiful countries in Africa. It should be, with all that we have. I mean, the coast, the sea coast run from Cape Mount all the way down to, Greenville and Harper, the Atlantic Ocean. Why aren't we making use of this? Liberia is not. I don't even think Liberia is a major exporter of fishery. I don't think so. I think maybe we import a lot of fish. I don't know. I gotta do a research on that. When we get to Liberia, democracy in Africa, and the segment is on Liberia, it'll be very interesting. So I want to look at all these different things. But when you juxtapose what goes on in Liberia and Mauritius, it's miles apart from what goes on.
The education.
So social. So there's ethnic and religious cohesion. I talk about, the different composition of, the different groups, right? Mauritius is a conglomeration of different ethnic groups. River says Pro asked a very salient question. Mauritius is a creation, if you will. One can argue it is a creation of the colonial project, where a group of Europeans enter a place on the island, and they created this environment where they settled and brought slaves. And when slave trade ended, they brought indentured servants to work on these plantations, and hence the Mauritian state, the island nation of Mauritius, the island country of Mauritius, the archipelago of Mauritius. So in Mauritius, there has been no major violence since 1968, no major ethnic violence since 1968. That is tremendous. And the Creoles remain marginalized. So that's one of the bullet points that I have up there. The Creole, or the African community, the Afro-Mauritian community, that community remains marginalized. So beneath, again, the veneer of stability and wealth and all these different things, that is an issue that the Mauritian society, political leaders are contending with now. How can we make this society equitable in a way that responds to the need of 21st century Mauritius. So they're studying that. This is one of the reasons why they came out with the Truth Commission report. I read somewhere where now they're trying to have more inclusion in terms of women inclusion. But the thing about that is they have to be careful with that, because when you talk about women inclusion in general, that would still favor the larger ethnic groups.
Yeah.
Or the Indo-Mauritians will favor them, perhaps, in my estimation, because the most women would be coming from the Indo-Mauritian population, as opposed to the Afro-Mauritian population, who will still remain underrepresented in the political life of Mauritius. The Franco-Mauritians, something has to be done, because these guys are dominating the economy. They just dominate the economy, the top tier of the economy. Education in Mauritius, they're 92 to 94% literacy rate, compared to Liberia, which is 48%, I think. I mentioned something, Dennis. I brought up these public holidays for a reason. When you look at these public holidays, Eid al-Fitr is the end of Ramadan. The Ramadan now, at the end of Ramadan, the celebration is Eid al-Fitr. So we will go, there's prayer service and people go home and eat, so that's the end of the holy month of Ramadan. That is celebrated in Mauritius as a public holiday. You also have Christmas that's celebrated as a public holiday in Mauritius. You have the arrival of indentured laborers and laborers celebrated. You have holidays also celebrated for in recognition of Afro-Mauritians in Mauritius.
Diwali.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have these holidays that are inclusive. What do we have in Liberia that is, again, multi-ethnic, but we're very divisive? You can't have Eid al-Fitr in Liberia. You can't talk about it. Okay, it's taboo. When you begin to talk about that, then you're trying to bring down the Liberian government. These Muslims will take over. That's what we usually believe, foolishly believe, in places like Liberia. But look at Mauritius, this prosperous economy, this prosperous island, this model of African democracy has all of these. They're inclusive in terms of, people just celebrating this day. And they're not sitting there saying, oh, yeah, if we include Eid al-Fitr, maybe, our economy is going to suffer. I've heard that argument in Liberia. Oh, no, we have too many holidays already. Why add more? Okay, why don't you subtract all the useless ones you have and put in Eid al-Fitr? I'm just saying. So, the fact that other countries can recognize this and Liberia in 2026 doesn't recognize this, it's mind-boggling. You have a group of people who came, established the first government, established churches. They put down their rules. Somewhere you said that the things that they did, a lot of the things that they did was not acceptable to you. They were not acceptable. We all agree. But now, some of the things that are acceptable to you, their impositions, are acceptable. Some of their impositions are acceptable. I'm just saying that we can look at other countries and their examples to say, we're not going to die. Our country is not going to disintegrate if we include these other people, this other group, this other community. If we're all inclusive, our country is not going to disintegrate. As you can see, the example, Mauritius still exists. They didn't disintegrate. They're prosperous. They've never had a military coup d'etat.
The thing about this, almost everything. Remember when dual citizenship we were talking about? Say, oh no, the people will come, commit crimes and run away. So don't do it. Say, well, let's change the Negro clause. Oh no, we're not ready.
Right.
Let's include Fula want to be said, no, we can do this one.
You can't do that.
It's like every time we find an excuse for the next 100 years not to do something.
Right.
And
Right.
we cannot say, okay, let's look at how is this going to benefit us,
Mm-hmm.
so we can put in the right safeguard
Mm-hmm.
to prevent whatever we are afraid of.
Right. Right.
We can, if we say don't do it, we're not ready.
Right.
And so for the next 150 years, we still not going to be ready.
Right.
Let me welcome 605-313-6004. The code is 791-403#. You should please call if you want to be part of the conversation. The number is scrolling in the text there in our ticker. It's also on the social media feed. You should call and let's talk. You may just have a comment, question, anything. Call and be a part. I want to also announce, Mr. Sherif, that I have started a civic education series.
Yes.
Yeah, so we should to teach about the importance of citizenship.
Yes.
What does it mean to be a Liberian citizen?
Yes.
What you're supposed to do. So let me, and there is a song that goes with it.
Yes.
That you will even like. Take a listen.
Down to the sea, our country stands on freedom, built for you and me. The Constitution tells us how the nation should be run, but democracy grows stronger when citizens join as one. Citizen and country, hand in hand we stand. Rights and responsibilities, building this great land. Speak with knowledge, vote with wisdom. Let your voice be heard. A stronger Liberia begins with every informed word. Liberia. Know your rights as a citizen. Freedom, justice, and the law. But remember, every freedom.
Every freedom comes with responsibility, Mr. Sherif. And that series starts tomorrow.
Yes.
If you go online, you're going to see we have created all the training videos. There are 15 videos in that series, and you'll like it. You can get it anywhere else better.
Look, absolutely right. And that is important, Dennis. So civic education, our leaders need to invest time and resources into that, right? So to me, if I'm in leadership, one of the things that I would require is this sort of civic education, you can have an e-learning, right? We do e-learning in our different offices. You can have an e-learning session, within like every 3 months, every 4 months. I mean, you retrain your staff, you retrain people to understand, and you also do this sort of civic education all across the board in schools and places like that. But I'm, focused on the workplace right now, where people need to learn these things. I mean, trust me, there's a lot of people, including, in our leadership, people in higher leadership that don't have the fundamental civic education. They don't have it. A lot of these people, believe it or not, that are even in some of these people that are in the legislature, maybe not a lot, but some of them I can tell you, they don't know the Constitution. You know, they don't know the Constitution. Some have not read the Constitution, perhaps. Because if they did, why is it that, you know, ever since 1986, we're dealing with the same old divisive Constitution? We have this Constitution since 86. What is wrong with us? A war was fought because somebody believed that another person was a dictator. They removed that, but you remove that person. Oh, so the qualm was about for you to go and sit in the executive mansion. It wasn't about a radical revolutionary change. It was not about changing the society to a new society, a new law, a new constitution that will respond to the needs of all Liberians. You left it as is. The next president comes in, who was also anti-military, left the Constitution intact, move on. Another president come in. I mean, so we've had these transitions over and over and again, but we're stuck in the same place.
We have a caller.
We just have change in leadership, but we're stuck in the same place.
And I like your references. We'll talk about them. Let's get a caller. Call out your name and where you calling from.
AKA Vincent. What's up?
Hey, Princess Pro.
My man, every time you keep telling me, hey, this rebel children, what they gonna say? Every time you keep telling me, when I accumulate charges, so when my bill comes, all the wholesale charges, I will send it to folks.
Right. That one cent I will pay. I think for this call, it may cost you like 10 cents or 20 cents.
Okay. So yeah, look, this is great, child. You gotta be moving to my issue on to a later hour. I know we got so much distraction going on our other issue, but this professor, I will call it Professor Sherif have been very, educated in this program. I'm learning a lot, and even thanks for this Diago Garcia thing. I heard about that thing, but I didn't really know it was in Mauritius. So I really want to thank. Special thanks and appreciation to focus on Liberia for imparting these knowledges into us. So, but my point has to do is a point where, you know, it has a question too. So, I know Professor Sherif boast about this nice stability in Mauritius, but I got a different view of it. I see this whole pluralistic society as a kind of glue or gorilla glue that holding something that is kind of artificial, and eventually it may break. We see the situation in South Africa now where Trump is saying, well, the white people have been marginalized, give them asylum. And let me come to my own country, Liberia. We don't have that. Even in Liberia, we got Lebanese Liberia. And then it's still that. Well, like who call that animal guy or marine captain, all these guys they are Lebanese, even though they have one Liberian parent. So I'm worried about Mauritius with that level of pluralistic. Pluralism. I mean, we mentioned the 1% of Chinese, the Indians. At what point? Because I mean, you said you want Liberia to be in such society, but I will totally disagree because we will have a difficulty with it. So I want you guys to envision this, Professor. At what point you think this will improve? Because and then even before that, look at Guinea. We have Guinea and Liberia, though, but we are finding it difficult to really know who the Guinean for Guinea as compared to the Liberian. We have a difficult that. I know we all have, but let me say this: when you're on the resettlement program, there are actual Guineans that really were Liberian were on the but most of these guys are local people. They are doing more development in Guinea. Then we are doing I'm confused. I said, what I mean? I thought this guy came out from Liberia. So that's some of the problems. So do you think Russia is still a young democracy according to they had an independent in 1960 something? That's very cool. Do you think I mean, do you think that's sustainable? That level of stability you talk about, or is it going to come a point where it's going to be like South Africa or other places where the Chinese start coming, the Dutch start coming, more Indian, and then the indigenous become more marginalized? It becomes a problem. Is it sustainable?
Thank you. Mr. Sherif.
Yeah, thank you, Reverend Says Pro. It's a profound question, and his question speaks to something that is that we experienced in Liberia. I mean, the Truic Party, the oligarchy was, in office for over 100 years. Who would have thought that in 1980, all of a sudden that, that oligarchy would disappear? But there were writings on the wall, though. There were people who were predicting trouble, even before 1980, way back in the 1960s. There were people who predicted back in the 1950s. There were predictions that, if things remain the way they are, this is a recipe for trouble. And trouble came in 1980 and beyond. So in the case of Mauritius, it's a profound question. You have this large population, although the Indo-Mauritians are significantly larger, right, by 2-to-1 margin, right, or more. But you also have, the Afro-Mauritians. They're about 28 to 30% of the population of Mauritius who remain underrepresented in the economy. They remain underrepresented in government because you have a democracy. They don't have the numbers, right? So you must have the number to be able to get somewhere. There's a reason why, for example, in Liberia, everybody can be president. You must have the number. The Afro-Mauritians don't have that number to propel them into an executive position. But more importantly, they remain underrepresented in the economy, where the economy is still dominated by this small population of Franco-Mauritians, these descendants of slaveholders who still control the Mauritian economy. And so that is a problem. And so the Mauritian society leadership has to contend with this. And this is what they're doing now. And that's one of the reasons why they set up the Truth Commission, and they've been doing some studies around these issues. This is a very critical issue, River Says Pro. I'm telling you.
Apparent was the loss that Prime Minister.
Yeah, go ahead, Dennis. Go ahead.
No. I just want to say it's always good for people to study and say, what do we do?
Yeah.
Instead of leaving things as they are.
Yeah.
And just waiting for say, oh well, we're not ready, or this is going to happen. Because even this country we're in, America, it's an experiment.
Yeah.
People kept trying, as ugly as the Star Wars, they got it right at some point and start moving on as number one, democracy. So we can work on things. A society is not handed down to us, or a democracy is not handed down, and it should just remain that way.
And here's the thing. So yeah, and here's the thing. So when you look at Mauritius, right, it's almost you feel as an African, as a Black African, me personally, just me speaking personally, separate away from my professional self, right? But as an individual, I felt bad because here is a country where Africans were captured and brought in to work on these plantations, and they were the liberals. They were, they didn't get paid or anything like that. And then, they were just, they were merchandise according to the French. Okay, the French regarded them not as human beings, but as merchandise that can be sold, bought, that can be resold. So Africans were resold, for profits. Africans were bought for profit. And so when you look at their contribution then to the Mauritian state, to now, to where they are now, as an individual, as an African, you have to feel bad about where they're at, because it was not their own making. And this is why I have to continue to thank Riverside Pro for really, thinking ahead, of this discussion, talking about, the creation of the Mauritian state and how it was created. It's an invention. It's a colonial invention. So you already have this, large number of African population that were slaves. So now slavery has ended. So the colonial masters introduced a new kind of slavery called indentured servitude. And they brought and they invested, not in Africans this time, but they went to India because the British controlled India at the time. So it was British India. They brought tens of thousands of Indians, from the Indian subcontinent, the Hindus, most of them are Hindus and Muslims. They brought them to Mauritius to occupy, to do the work that the African people were doing for free. Indentured servants were not paid either. Other historians argue that indentured servitude was another form of slavery as well. So, why did it do that? Again, this is a problem. This is what colonialism did. Colonialism pitted us against one another. I mean, you want to pit the crew against the Grebos and the crews, the Mandingos against this other group against this other group. So to me, it was a way of them pitting, ethnic groups against one another. And so tremendously, they brought a lot of, Indians, into Mauritius, who are today dominant in the political sphere of the country. There are 4 countries where, the Indian majority, where there, the Indian diaspora is large. You have Fiji, you have Guyana, you have Trinidad, and then Mauritius. And in 2 of those countries, you have the Indian majority. In 4 of those countries, in those 4 countries, you either have the Indian majority, the Indians, Indo diaspora in leadership, or there's significant opposition. In Fiji, for example, there was a military coup in Fiji, I believe in 1985, where the indigenous people rose up. The party that won was a party allied with the Indian diaspora, Indo-Fijians. The indigenous people came back in the form of a military coup and overthrew the Indian-dominated government because they wanted their country back from, layman's interpretation. They took their country back, through a military coup in Fiji. When you look at Guyana, for example, Guyana is, you have the biggest opposition is dominated by the Indo diaspora, people from India, but the Afro-Guyanese are in the leadership. The ruling party is dominated by Indo-Guyanese. The story is different when you look at Trinidad. Trinidad, I think, is the Indian majority. So you have this dynamic going on in other countries as well. And this is the creation of colonialism. They brought, a large number of Indians into those countries, into Fiji, into Guyana, into Trinidad, Barbados, and other countries like that. And so up in the 21st century, in 2026, not 21st century, you have this, this problem of, the Indian majority, versus the indigenous people. Right. So you have that. So these 4 countries, for anyone who is doing a research on Mauritius, anyone who is doing a research on this kind of topic, you can take these 4 countries as your case study to better understand what these colonial creation that, Riverside's Pro question, his question was directed to how they've impacted these other countries, how they have impacted these societies. It's tremendous. It's, sometimes you feel bad.
And Mauritius just had an election. Let's get a little clip as we close the broadcast.
Yes.
We'll get a clip from that.
Yeah.
So apparent was the loss that Prime Minister Jagannath conceded defeat even before the final tally.
The People's Coalition is heading towards a huge defeat. I've tried to do what I can for the country and the population. The population has decided to choose another team. I wish good luck to the country.
Mauritius is a parliamentary republic. The party that secures more than half the seats in parliament, in this case 31, bags the prime minister's post, who serves a 5-year term. Jagannath has been prime minister since 2017. He succeeded his father, who stepped down from the post. His October agreement with the United Kingdom to regain sovereignty over the Chagos Islands seems to have failed in swaying the voters, whose main issue is a cost of living crisis despite strong economic growth. The country's youth unemployment rate stands at around 20%.
My goal is to liberate Mauritians, restore our country's reputation, and give you back your rights.
Navin Ramgoolam, a doctor turned lawyer, is now poised to be the country's next leader. He is a very familiar face in the world of Mauritian politics. The son of Siwosago Ramgoolam, who led Mauritius to independence in 1968, has been prime minister 3 times already. Analysts say this is in part because of his success in promoting a stable economic development. He has experienced his fair share of controversy and was arrested in 2015 for alleged conspiracy and money laundering, but was acquitted. His party promises to increase pensions, introduce free transport and internet services, as well as reduce fuel prices. Jagannath becomes the second African leader to suffer an overwhelming defeat this month.
I, Juma Gideon Bogo.
3,000 kilometers away in Botswana, voters sent former President Mohamed Sherif packing in yet another shocking defeat in favor of now President Duma Boko. If anything, tables appear to be turning on the continent, which indicates to those in leadership that it may no longer be business as usual. Grace Kuriakanja, TRT World.
Yeah,
interesting.
Yeah, so as you can see there, Navin Ramgoolam is the son of Sir Siwosago Ramgoolam, who was the first prime minister of Mauritius, an independent leader of Mauritius. And I just want to add that Mauritius gained independence not through a sort of conflict or war that you saw in we will find in other African countries. You know, for example, in East Africa, in Kenya, and other places, there was no civil strife in Mauritius. Mauritius independence was obtained through a series of conferences and negotiations with the British, and so they had independence. You could argue that their independence came on the silver platter. But that being said, they've been able to manage that country very well in terms of making sure that there's stability, in terms of listening to the minority, because, you know, I'm reminded of Dr. Jimmy Harmon's, fight for the inclusion of Creole, and Afro-Mauritian language into the curriculum, of Mauritian schools. He's one person. What if there were many Dr. Harmon? Maybe there will be changes in other areas. I think what the Afro-Mauritian minority need to probably do is to stand up in other areas, and more advocacy is needed. Dr. Harmon referred to himself as the Steve Biko, the Nelson Mandela, and all these different things. There needs to be many more of Dr. Harmon in Mauritius to give the level of visibility and assertiveness to importance to Afro-Mauritians. Riversets Pro did mention, he predicted trouble. I think, if I'm correct, that was his prediction, that there will be trouble. Politics, Dennis, is fluid. We can sit here and predict now that, this is a peaceful island, in the middle of the ocean, very peaceful, stable. Everything is gorgeous, the aesthetic, everything. We don't know what's going to happen. 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. We don't know what's going to happen 60 years from now. This is a country with no standing army. Maybe some disgruntled African is going to rise up and, up in that stability, in the interest of equity, and all these different things. We don't know that for sure. But what we do know is that, if history tells us anything, is the fact that Mauritius has been stable for 48 years. So we can prognosticate that, this is going to continue. But we don't know we can only prognosticate based on past experience. But we don't know what bumps are going to be in the road, going forward. There may be some bumps here and there, and that may cause some level of instability in Mauritius. But this is not something that I would like to see. I would like to see changes done progressively in a way that respond to the current reality. The current reality is that this country is wealthy. This country is stable. So we like to see that stability in terms of, prosperity for all, so to speak, prosperity for the Afro-Mauritian, prosperity for Indo-Mauritian, prosperity for everyone. So the prosperity, the wealth that's at the top, so that wealth filters down to everybody, including the Afro-Mauritians. And that is my hope. And, and I hope that happens, for everybody. But for right now, and it's almost like we're cherry picking. We're picking at what needs to happen. But for right now, they're stable. I hope that there will be a lot of Dr. Hammers that will come on, that will be activists for their communities in Mauritius.
Thank you, Mr. Sherif. On that note, we're going to be closing the broadcast tonight. Until next time we come your way, we end with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Have a good night and God bless.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our home.